Hello and welcome back to Bitcoin with Jake. Today I'm speaking with Dusan Matuska. Welcome, Dusan. How are you?
Hi, Jake. I'm doing great.
Brilliant. And thank you so much for joining me today. This is a show about Bitcoin, as you probably guessed, and we talk about people's personal journeys to Bitcoin. Everyone's got a unique lens. And what I love understanding is what people have understood prior to coming across Bitcoin and what their experience means in connection to what Bitcoin actually is. So, we'll try and unpack that over the next hour or so. To kick things off, when did you first come across Bitcoin? Was it a passing comment at university and a mate's trying to buy some drugs online, or was it like a good friend of yours was a high profile investor and was getting involved? Everyone has a slightly different angle. So talk to me about when you first came across it.
Yeah, the first interaction or the first hearing about that was somewhere around 2015 when with my friend. He was studying IT school, just mentioned it to me. But at the time, as most of the people are like, oh, it's a scam, it's a bubble, it's just this geeky money. So at the time, I didn't pay attention, and I just forget about it, just like random information that came to my world.
Hmm.
And I got back to it like deeply in 2017, sometimes in the summer. I had a company at the time. The company is still alive, but I left it for my friends and colleagues to continue. So we were building outdoor workout parks, and we needed a new website. So I called my friend Peter, who was really great web designer, and he came to an office. We started talking, and he told me like, you know what, Dushan? So right now I'm not fully focused on the websites because I'm studying and trading Bitcoin. I was like, oh my god, man! Like it they got you as well. You really fell into this scam. So I was really feeling bad for him. But I said like, okay, I trust Peter. So Peter, please, so tell me why you, why now, and everything. And he started to speak and discuss with me not the reasons or not the price things, not why we're going to the moon and all these kind of things about the price, but more about what the Bitcoin technology can allow to people around the world in economies where they have high inflation rates, where they don't have banks around. How Bitcoin can really help them. So we are really speaking about this social social side of Bitcoin, or this philosophy side of Bitcoin. And that's what really got me at the time. But I was still thinking like, okay, there needs to be something wrong, and Peter is missing something. So when I came home, I started to study everything I could find, videos, podcasts, and there was almost nothing in Slovak language at the time. Um, and I got really deep into that, and I realized it's like 3 or 4 a.m. when I was like, oh my God, I should go to sleep. And the next day, I sent a message to my colleagues and friends like, guys, I'm not coming to work for about 2 3 days. I want to study Bitcoin.
Yep.
So that was my getting deeper into rabbit hole during those days, and I was fell in love with the thing and learning every day a bunch of new stuff. And after that, I realized, because I loved education, I was teaching mathematics, physics, and English during my university studies. And I said, like, this is amazing tech, and I want to teach it to people. So I started to do free consultations. But again, I knew maybe 30, 40% of what I should have known. And every time I got a question from some of my friends that came to this consultation times, I was like, okay, I don't know the answer to that, but I will write it down. I will find the answer, and I will come back to you. So this was the process how I really learned uh, on a fast way, and really reacted to all these kind of questions, doubts, and everything. And later on, in a few months, I did my first public workshop, and I started my journey as a Bitcoin educator.
Wonderful. And so you mentioned the Slovak language. So for those people out there that don't know what that means, can you teach us about where you live, where you grew up, and
Mhm.
what the Slovak language is?
Yeah, so I live in Slovakia. I was born here in a small city, about 40,000 people, and currently I'm living in the capital of Bratislava. So we're located in Central Europe, small country, about 5 million people, next to Czech Republic, next to Austria, Ukraine as well. That's why we are kind of afraid a little bit at these times. And so it's a small country, but there is a lot of Bitcoin things happening around here. One thing that we have, like the first place that we have in the world, let's say, in Europe, is that Slovakia had the first Bitcoin ATM in Europe in 2013. And it was a nice story because there was a CoinDesk or some article on CoinDesk, like Finland and in Helsinki, the first Bitcoin ATM in Europe. And my friend was like, wow, I set up the ATM here 1 week before they claimed they did it. So he wrote them, he claimed, he showed
A
the proof of
photograph or
that.
something.
And they said like, okay, sorry guys, Slovakia has the first place in Europe for setting up the ATM. So we got this on the world map of Bitcoin.
Wow. Okay, cool. And so what I love to understand is often there are like financial services difficulties in places that aren't so, commonly spoken about in Western media. Specifically, I grew up in the UK and very dominated by that type of information. So what's it like growing up in Slovakia in terms of a financial product? Is there lots of banks? How does the money work? What's a bit of a history about the country in terms of how it functions economically? I'd love to learn some more about the background of it all.
Mm-hmm. So we've been a socialistic country till 89, and we've been a Czechoslovakia till 93. So we've been a country out of two countries, let's say. But I was born in 1993. I was already born into Slovakia. My sister was born into Czechoslovakia. But growing up here, it's not that bad. I mean, we have banks all around the place. We can pay with telephones, with cards everywhere. So mainly the capital, because the capital is really different than the regions. The regions are more slowly developing as it used to be, or as it is
In
almost
most
everywhere.
places as well. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, in most places, but the capital is growing super fast. I had a friend right now. He was in Amsterdam right now. He's there on the Bitcoin conference, and he told me like some of the prices for food in restaurants are the same as in Slovakia, which is crazy. The prices of housing is skyrocketing here. There's a huge amount of development.
Wow.
So growing up here, the financial products were really abundant, let's say. So we didn't have any problems. That's why it's really interesting to speak with people about Bitcoin, because many of them are asking, why do we need it? What's the reason? We have PayPals, we have cards, we have telephones, and bunch of these technologies. Why do we need Bitcoin? And it was a big difference in, for example, when I was in Honduras, in Roatan, where people, the banks work a bit differently. It's harder to get a bank account. There are big lines of people standing up in front of the bank waiting for the checks to reimburse. The fees for card transactions are really high there. So and people are really open to Bitcoin in Honduras, in Roatan, where we are setting up the academy right now. So Slovakia, it's like things are working. We have euro since 2009. So basically, just like in European Union, in other countries like in Austria, we're really like the Bratislava and Vienna are basically the two closest capitals in the world, and it's working quite well on this financial level.
Okay. Interesting, because it's something that you learn about when you start looking at Bitcoin, and the kind of product market fit is different for different people in some ways. So like whether it's a store of value or a unit of account, there's the different forms or different use cases for money apply to people differently. But it's an interesting problem in that, for example, I'm trying to persuade my siblings to buy some more Bitcoin as our family trust, but they just don't see the value proposition in the same way I do, and are very comfortable with the other investment products that are being used. If anything, they prefer different things to Bitcoin. And so how do you persuade people that have abundant financial services that Bitcoin's useful? Like,
Well,
have you
I
come
tell
up
them
with a
stories.
strategy that's useful for friends and family in Slovakia where they don't have those problems like exist in Honduras, for example? Like, you know, we should all be doing this in a sense, is like pooling orange pill techniques for certain types of character. Do you know what I mean? Um,
Yeah, yeah, I get what you mean. So when I really fell in love with Bitcoin, initially I was really trying to persuade everybody, and I
mm.
was trying to orange pilling everybody. You know, like these memes are going like on a dinner with your family, like you're trying not to speak about Bitcoin and you're really trying hard. So my first years or first months was were like this. Right now I'm more relaxed in that. I'm not, you know, this militant trying to push it to everybody.
Mm.
I'm just putting out content, and people know that I work with Bitcoin. I'm doing education, and they are going, you know, they are approaching me, and I'm helping them on this level. But when somebody's interested or asking me like, so tell me why, and they are skeptical, you know, most of the time I'm speaking about the history of money, why a lot of money's failed, and I'm telling them stories from the history. One that I love particularly is the story of Yap Island and the rice stones. You know, these circular large stones made out of limestone, and how they ended up, what made them fail as a currency, as a money. Then stories from Roman era, where the Roman emperors were doing coin clippings, or they melted the coins down and mixed them with different metals to make them less valuable with a less amount of silver. So a bunch of these stories, and people are really like uh, understanding that if somebody has control over money, then they can really misuse this control, and most of the time in expense of the people that are saving saving money. And also I'm telling them stories like recently the one from Lebanon, when where the guy came to a bank with a gun claiming to get his money without the bank giving it to him, right? So I'm trying to show people that money in the bank is not your own money. And on these stories, people realize, okay, they should really think about it more, or they should learn about Bitcoin more, because it's something different than what they expected. And only when they are kind of willing to, okay, please tell me more and I want to learn more, then I go deeper into Bitcoin, because otherwise it's not sticking. If I'm trying to tell them or convince them about all the characteristics and the beauties of Bitcoin, they don't have the need, right? They don't have the question why they need it. So first of all, I'm trying to show them why would they need Bitcoin, and then they are really open to listen to that more, and really go into the rabbit hole.
Yeah, so it's almost like you use historical analogies to highlight a problem that's actually very simple to understand, which is, well, hang on,
Yeah.
what if someone who has the same money as you is able to have twice as much money because they can manipulate the money by, you know, as you mentioned, like sailing
Mm-hmm.
into Yap Island with extra stones that are fake, or
Yeah.
you know, chopping a coin in half and filling up the other half with metal that's worthless. Um,
Mm.
it's a really interesting lens. Okay, cool. Well, I will definitely try and inherit that in my own techniques to persuading people, because I also really enjoy historical context. Like, there's some great stuff out there. Tur de Meister's articles that you can read about, for instance, the Reformation and the importance of the printing press, and how that completely and utterly revolutionized a particular era of history that actually I didn't know too much about, but was a very important one as part of
Mm-hmm.
the UK at least. And that's like, wow, this is such an important time in our in human history, in a sense. um let's dig in a bit further. Basically, it's that kind of prompt,
Mm-hmm.
isn't it? Okay, all right, I need to learn
Mm-hmm.
some more about this, and then here we are on a Bitcoin podcast in different parts of the world talking about it. It's absolutely fantastic. So Dusan, I'd love to understand a bit more about your journey. So you mentioned that you were working for this other company. um was that straight out of university that you decided? You mentioned it was like outdoor sports parks or something you were building. Did you
Yeah.
study
Yeah,
technology
we're
as a student or something, or what's given you like this passion to jump into Bitcoin and become an educator?
so on my secondary school, in my high school, I was studying IT development. So I wanted to be a programmer. But in my third grade, when we decided to really pick up a school and go to the school, I knew that I want to go to programming school. But I had a huge argument with my IT teacher, and I said I would never do programming because of that. So maybe it's a pity. I don't know. Maybe I would get into Bitcoin sooner, but nobody knows. So I ended up in economic schools and management studies. And when I was 21, we founded a company because we were like big fans of outdoor street workout, and we built a community in our small city. And we saw that people want to have these parks that we built for our city. So we decided to set up a company to build these parks around. And the company is growing. We built more than 300, 400 parks already around Europe, 5 countries, 6 countries. So, but in 2017, 2018, I needed to decide what to focus on. And at the time, I already knew that I wanted it to be Bitcoin because it gave me so much more. I had much more passion in that. I saw it as something that's worth pursuing. It's worth educating around the world. So I said to my colleagues, to my co-founders, like, guys, this is my decision, and I kind of gave them all the responsibilities. I'm still, I think, the largest shareholder. I don't know. I don't know yet, but I want to sell the shares and just focus on Bitcoin.
Okay.
So yeah, we founded it on university. I think the first or second grade of university.
Wow. And it's interesting to me. I've already spoken to a number of people on this podcast. Like entrepreneurship comes very naturally to some people. Like the idea of starting a
Mm-hmm.
company when you're 21, most would be like, no way. Like I'm studying, I'm going to go get a job or whatever. What do you think is it about the mentality of entrepreneurs that attracted you to making that decision? Was it something that you'd always wanted to do, start a company? And I would argue that adopting Bitcoin is like investing in a startup in some ways. Like you're buying a new
Mm-hmm.
thing. It's potentially extremely valuable, but it isn't yet. And there's a lot of work to build it all out. So it's a very, very entrepreneurial thing to attach yourself to, even though you describe yourself as a Bitcoin educator, which, in theory is being a teacher. And that's a very, very old profession that doesn't sound like it's innovating at all. So
Mm-hmm.
talk to me a bit about the mentality behind those decisions. Was it something you always wanted to do, start a company? And then equally, what from that experience have you been able to take through into the education side of things?
Mm-hmm. It wasn't something I wanted always to do. It just came naturally. I knew that I had in myself this kind of sense of freedom that I want to do things my own way. I want to manifest, let's say, my vision to the world, and this entrepreneurship came naturally. So I like to explore things. So, for example, on high school, we used to ship headphones from China because at the time, the AliExpress was booming and eBay. So I was shipping in the Beats headphones, and they cost like $12 to ship it in, and we were selling them for 60 euros. And euros
Whoa.
and dollars were approximately the same thing at the
Whoa.
time, or euro were even stronger. So we make some amount of money on that as a young guys, 17, 18 years old.
Awesome.
And I like the idea that, okay, we figured out how the system works and how we can make money, and both parties were happy about it, in the end. So I like this thing, like, okay, I do a service, I got paid for that. All of us were happy after that, so it's like a voluntary exchange. That's what I really loved about that. And for the Octago, for our workout company, again, it came just from passion. So we were street workouters, we were doing the sport, and we built the workout park for ourselves with the city. We went to them, we inspired them, like, look, we are a group, we are spending our free time out in the park, doing this sport. So please build for us a proper workout park. And they said, like, okay, let's do it, but they needed guidance. So we gave them guidance, how it should look like, what materials to use, and everything. We drew up how it should look like. And when we did an opening, even like 400 people came there. They were asking like, how can we have the same parks in our own cities? And we said like, wow, so people want it. There is a demand.
Wow.
We know how to do that because we went over the process. So why not to do a business?
Mm.
We didn't know anything about manufacturing at the time. My dad was helping us a lot because he had some skill in manufacturing. So it just really came naturally out of a passion. And I spent, since 2014 when we started the company till 2018, so 4 years, I was managing the company and focusing all my time into that. So it just came naturally, and I knew that it's something I want to do because it gave me the sense of purpose that we were really helping people to stay outdoors and to move their bodies, and we were reshaping, the nature around us, and the feeling when we built the park and they were, I was walking down the road and seeing, families and kids playing in the park, doing the workout. It was amazing feeling like you build something and it's going to last 10-20 years. Maybe my kids will be, playing there as well one day. And this gave me feeling like, wow, this is what I love to do. I love to create things and be part of the change, not just like one wheel in the system, but really reshaping and deciding where to go, how to do that, and so on.
And I can echo your sentiments in terms of there's something very exciting about entrepreneurship, like starting something from scratch and talking to people
Yeah.
about what do you see as an opportunity and why, and dissecting ideas, good from bad, what went wrong, what did you learn from it, how did
Mm-hmm.
you improve, and
Yeah.
as you said, there was a demand that you had. That demand you satisfied. Along the way, you learned how to create that product, and then other people are like, we want the same thing. It's like it's absolutely
Mm-hmm.
natural to start selling that product to other people. um
Mm-hmm.
okay, and so you'd gone through this and you decided, okay, I'm going to listen to, I think you mentioned your friend who was a web designer. What was his name? Sorry. Peter.
Peter.
Yeah, okay, so shout out to Peter wherever he is, that
Yeah. I'm
that
telling
like
everybody like
sucked you
that's
into
the guy who
Bitcoin.
brought me.
So,
Yeah.
so you mentioned already that it was the kind of the social and philosophical impact of what Bitcoin might mean that really caught your attention.
Mm-hmm.
Go into a little more detail on that. So, maybe this can include not necessarily what you were thinking at the time, but how your thought process has developed over time, and what really drives you every day to get up and teach people about Bitcoin.
Hmm. So yeah, since I was studying economics and mathematics, I was really like I was mostly learning about this Keynesian economics, this central plan thing, and this was promoted to us as that's how we
Mm,
need to do that, and inflation is necessary, and government needs to spend money, all these kind of things, and then I never liked, authorities. I never liked the oppression from above. So I was really trying every time with everything to kind of break free. So when Bitcoin came, it kind of showed me like, okay, this might be a tool for the change. And my my mindset or my set of, let's say, values changed a little bit as well because I was drawn more into libertarian economics, Austrian economics, um, a new era or new dimension of digital privacy and digital self-defense open to me. So what Bitcoin brought to me was like complete new sense of who am I and what are really my values deep down. Because with the company that we had with the outdoor street workouts, we were mostly dealing with public money, let's say with cities, municipalities,
yeah,
and local governments.
government money
So it was,
essentially. Yeah.
yeah, it was a government money basically. And I didn't like it, but I wasn't sure what I don't like about it. And when I found Bitcoin and went deeper into that, I realized, okay, I don't want to support a system anymore like this. And it was rotten, right? It was rotten inside. So that was also one of the decisions why I decided to go into Bitcoin, because it really manifested my values and how I feel, how I want to live much better than visiting governments and like telling them, and they decide with public money that they want to do a workout park, but the city would maybe needed a new road or whatever, but they would just build a park. I was happy because we get the money, we build it, but the people were like, some of them were super happy, some of them were like, why we build this? Because we need some different stuff, so this was for me like, I don't want to support this very much. So that was why I decided to go deeper into Bitcoin.
And sorry, so the libertarian or Austrian economics that you mentioned, was that a subject that you'd researched prior to learning about Bitcoin?
Nope.
No.
I just heard about that, but it was just somewhere on the surface and just somewhere there, but I never dig deeper into that. I didn't have time, when you're building a startup, I didn't have time to do anything else, just just the work
But
basically.
it's a
So
it's a
I
very,
burned
very
out at the time.
it's a niche form of economics. I mean, no one really
Yeah.
talks about it. It's also, I'm the same. So I went to a business school and did my business management degree and was heavily influenced by Keynesian thinking. And as you said, it's all about central planning, government stimulus, reduce unemployment, increase disposable income, blah, 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 blah. But no one can explain why there's a boom bust every 10 years.
Yeah.
And it's just given that like central banking is totally fine. Like, don't think
Yeah.
about central banking. Just work out how to make
Yeah.
money.
Don't question
Don't
that.
don't
Don't
ask
question
what
it.
don't
It
ask what
needs to be
money
like this.
actually is.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. So, how far is Bratislava to Vienna?
Like 50 kilometers or
Whoa.
50, 60. It's really
So,
close.
so I mean, I would only guess that you're so close to the home of Austrian economics. I'm just going through a great book at the moment called The Tao of Capital that my friend Nathan gave me. Shout out to Nathan, and reading about Carl Menger and then what happened during that process. Like it's just incredible how this way of thinking has been buried for like 100 years. Like there's been people
Yeah.
in a niche form of economics still talking about it. Ludwig von Mises obviously in the States become more famous over time, but it's ignored. It's completely ignored, and that's interesting in itself. Like, why is that? And I'd like
Yeah.
to
What
also
do you
like
think?
highlight,
Why is it?
yeah, and I'd like to highlight like something you mentioned as well, which was um, Bitcoin as a tool for change and digital self-defense. That's a really interesting concept. So, yeah, just teach me a bit more about how Austrian economics has influenced your thinking and what you like about it. And then why do you think that Bitcoin is a form of digital self-defense?
So, the thinking process of me and economics right now is more like, let's make things that are not in a private space, let's make them private. Let's try to crowdfund more things. I did a crowdfunding for a Bitcoin book for kids for translation, and seeing the power of crowds when something happens and they want to help, that's giving me a hope. And before I didn't see it as a tool for sourcing the public goods, but right now the more I learn and dig deep into Austrian economics, the more I see, what else does the government or doesn't the government need to finance, and we can do it by ourselves, maybe even more efficiently.
Mm.
So it kind of gives me this overview of like, we don't need a state basically, and I'm trying to do as little interaction with the state as possible. And I changed my residency to Paraguay right now, because
No
of
way.
the tax purposes and more freedom purposes, and because we are also starting a business there of Bitcoin mining. Um, and once I got into Austrian economics, it really gave me hope that the world can be healed, and that the market forces, is the that's how we can manifest the good for everybody, when on the voluntary basis of exchange. So it kind of gives me like, oh, this is how it works, and that's right and that's wrong, and this is more freedom related and this is not. So it kind of gives me this moral compass, and I'm not afraid then to point out to things that are immoral in my point of view, like taxes and so on. And that's what I didn't know before, because it was kind of like a foggy thing in the bag, like we need to have the central banks, we need to have this central planning.
Mm.
But right now I'm more like, okay with like, okay, it's reality, but we don't need to have it this way. And that's why I want to work on Bitcoin to kind of bring this change a little bit faster. And why I say that it's like a tool for digital self-defense. I'm also doing like a small workshops on digital self-defense, you know, teaching people about password managers, VPNs, Tor, and all these tools that they can use. And Bitcoin is one of them. Bitcoin is a tool for self-defense in financial era, or in financial industry. So yeah, you can be your own bank. You don't need to rely on authorities or institutions to keep your money and to give you the money when you want them. You know, I had a client, and when we talked about Bitcoin, he was like, "Oh my God!" So the bank is like, I imagine it like going out for a beer, and every day I need to ask my wife if she gives me money for a beer, like $5, and if she doesn't, I cannot go for a beer, right? And it was, for him, it was like such a revelation, or such like, oh my God, this is how it works. So he was super surprised by realizing that, you know. So that's what I'm trying to teach people, to get this power into their own hands with Bitcoin, with self custody of Bitcoin, of course, because, you know, having it on exchange basically the same as having your money in the bank. And this is why I like it a lot.
It's just an infinitely fascinating rabbit hole, isn't it? I love it as well. There's
Yeah.
just so many cool angles to it that suddenly
Yes.
your brain is able to think in a different way, and that new avenue of thinking, it's almost like the foundations for understanding how the world functions actually make sense.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's because
Completely.
of this idea that, like, you know, human action and praxeology are the most important ways of understanding, you know, human interaction. And the amount of unbelievably boring economics classes that I've sat through, where they show you this model and they say, yep, this is how it works, and just it just didn't catch my attention at all. And then you spend, you know,
Yeah.
10 years or so in business, and those lectures are retarded. You know, they're just not, it's just not how the world works. And then suddenly you go down this hole, and this starts to make a bit more sense. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's two things you touched on there that I can't help but ask about, because I'm personally intrigued. So you've taken up residency in Paraguay. Now, you're going to live in Bratislava, or you're going to move to Paraguay? How does that actually function as a relationship? And the point being is that we don't any longer live in an environment where your wealth is your physical house, or your physical cafe, or your physical factory, or your physical pub. You can actually
Mm-hmm.
own Bitcoin and live anywhere and take all your
Mm-hmm.
wealth with you. So what's the mentality behind opting for a different residency somewhere else, and where's that taking you?
Yeah. So it was, the decision was in the beginning of this year. Basically, one thing was that the privacy issue with in EU is going down. You know,
Yeah.
it's they are trying to really destroy all the anonymity, privacy in financial and whatever terms. So we're trying to search for a better place to live, and as a plan B. And then when the February came, when the war broke out in Ukraine,
Mm,
it gave us even more like, okay, we need to find a plan B, with my girlfriend, with my colleague and family.
yeah.
And at that time, you know, my friend, he's really crypto OG Bitcoiner. You know, he's doing penetration testing and security. He has a IT security company. He was buying Bitcoin when it was less than $1.
Wow.
He's a great guy. He's a great guy, and he's doing what we call, like, his company is called Liberation Travel. So he's helping Czechs and Slovaks mostly to find a better place to live, a more free place to live.
Mm,
And one of the easiest way how you can get a new residency somewhere else is in Paraguay or Uruguay or Panama, but Paraguay is one of the best. One thing, there's a territorial taxation, so when you have customers from abroad, you don't need to pay taxes as a physical person on that. So that was one thing, and the other, because we are mining Bitcoin since last year, so for about 1.5 years. And right now we are moving to Paraguay with our machines. We are in a month shipping them there, buying new ones. There was also reason why we said, okay, Paraguay might be the place to do business, to spend some time. But for a living, it seems that I will be going back and forth between maybe Slovakia, but also Roatan in Honduras. That's the place where we are setting up the Bitcoin Academy right now, and that's the place that I can imagine for a couple of months, a year, to really be living in, because it's a beautiful Caribbean paradise, amazing people there, an amazing jurisdiction which is Bitcoin oriented, where Bitcoin is legal tender, no capital gains on that, and so on. So I think I will be going around Paraguay, Roatan, and Slovakia in the next year. And we were planning with my girlfriend in January to go for 6 months to Roatan and see if that's the place to live, or we will be just going back and forth between Europe and Roatan. So it's kind of new thing for me, and in the next year I will be deciding on how to move on with the next chapter when we want to have kids and so on.
Well, yeah, so I'm now 2 babies in, so I'm not as mobile
Nice.
as I once was, but the plan that you've just laid out, it makes sense. It makes so much sense. And I'm going to guess, but in 10 years from now, I think a lot of people would have made a similar suggestion and done that. And it's just rational. Like, do you want to continue to pay high taxes? Do you want to continue to live in a place where you're not being listened to? Do you want to continue to live in, I mean, the threat of war is a whole nother kettle of fish entirely. I mean, I'm sitting in Australia. We're not under that same dark cloud in a sense, but the point is providing that there's not some ridiculous fucking lockdown and everyone's under some kind of mandated kind of can't go anywhere type situation, then free travel should ensure the ability to move wherever you want. And these kind of setups, like, they make sense. How cool. And sorry, so to touch on your Bitcoin mining, so you've been mining in Slovakia somewhere and you're looking to move over to Paraguay. What's the reasoning behind that?
Yeah, so it was really funny story, because I was just doing Bitcoin education, doing webinars and consultations, and on one of these consultations, a guy came last year in February, and we were just having a good talk. I was offering this 30 minutes free diagnostic consultation so that I can tell people where to go and how to approach Bitcoin. And in the end, he said, you know what? I have a mother-in-law and she owns a power plant, a biogas power plant.
Wow.
And do you think it might be good for mining? I was like, well, maybe if she's the owner, let's meet with her and know what was the price that she can give us. He's like, okay, I'm going to arrange that. In 2 weeks, we went on a meeting with this guy, with his mother-in-law, and she was really excited. She's like, older lady, about 50, 60, something like that, but she's really young in the spirit. And she was like, okay, everybody was approaching me with this Bitcoin mining thing, and telling me I need to give them 50% discount on the price. But you know what? For you guys, since you're my family, I'm gonna give you the better prices, and you can start with me. I was like, oh my god! And I do the math calculations behind it, and it really made sense. But that was at a time when the China was kind of dropping out.
Yeah.
So the hash rate went down, difficulty went down. So we had really great time mining, and then it starts to grow up, and current electricity situation in Europe is crazy. So 10 years, it was basically still the same price, and then like bam, 10 times higher, or
wow,
nine times, 10 times
interesting.
higher.
So the difficulty adjustment, like the hash rate is fucking high, and your electricity costs have gone up by 10x.
Yeah, and the price is low. So everything is like in the wrong place. So right now we needed to switch up the machines 2 weeks ago, and we already have the place to go in Paraguay.
Interesting.
So we'll be moving machines there. And our reasoning behind mining is that we want to use the money, the Bitcoin from mining, to finance the education operations.
Yep.
So that's why we founded the company called MTH, and our big mission is really to focus on education and finance it with the mine Bitcoin, and that will be like one of the sustainable businesses that we want to do. Mine and reinvest back to community for education
Brilliant.
purposes.
And so when it came to finding a location in Paraguay, I have a Telegram group here in Australia that I set up, Bitcoin Mining Australia. Anyone listening that hasn't had a look, take a look. But the finding stranded energy assets is actually very difficult. And specifically finding stranded energy assets that are monetizable at very, very low electricity costs. Very, very difficult. So how did you find the site in Paraguay? Obviously, you don't have to release all the details per se, but again, was someone approaching you because you were a face that was promoting Bitcoin as an educator and put a shout out to say anyone in Paraguay looking to mine, we want to move there? Or I'm just intrigued as to how that happened.
I was researching Paraguay for a while before that because it's one of the best locations currently in the world for multiple reasons. One is that Paraguay is the largest exporter of the electricity in the world.
Wow.
Basically, what they produce, they consume only about 60%, 50-60%. The rest they are selling for really low prices to Brazil, to Argentina. They have 100% hydroelectricity, so they don't have anything else than hydro, which is also something that not any other country has this. And the price per kilowatt hour right now is about 3.6 cents, which is
US
which is
dollars.
amazing, right? Yeah, US dollars. So Paraguay was really like a stranded, like they had excess amount of electricity. They have the second largest power plant in the world. And for many years, it was the first largest, and not only hydro power plant, but the first largest power plant in the whole world, like 16 gigawatts of output. And now the Chinese Three Gorge Dam is the first, and Paraguay Itaipu is the second largest currently. But still, it's a huge project. I was there this year. It's unbelievably like it's magnificent of what people can do. To like
Wow.
it was
Engineering is very
amazing.
cool. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So these were the reasons. And then when I came there to do my residency, I met some miners. I met people who were offering hosting spaces, selling land. So we started to do research. We started to cooperate and communicate with multiple of them. And right now, like we know like where to go. We have few offers for the lands,
Yeah.
for hosting spaces. So right now we are researching the whole roadmap, how
Brilliant.
to take that. But we already have the place where we can move in October, November.
Well done. That's fascinating, isn't it? So the 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 resilience of Bitcoin doesn't truly reveal itself until you start learning about the mining. And what I mean by that is, governments will just switch it off, as a standard kind of it won't work type comment. And it's like,
Yeah.
how will they actually do that? And this person they won't have an answer because they haven't looked into it. And who does, to be honest? So here we are talking about Bitcoin mining, seriously niche subject, but the the Bitcoin mine you were running became unviable for a number of different macroeconomic reasons, and you can just unplug them, ship them halfway around the world, and those problems have disappeared because you managed to change one of your inputs essentially. And that's fascinating. So you can switch it off for a small amount of time in one very small section of the mining infrastructure, and then turn it back on again somewhere else where it's better, it's going to better serve the network. And that's an incredibly resilient kind of characteristic to something that's a very nascent technology that people still don't really understand. And gives me huge faith that, if you're buying Bitcoin because you think it's going to go up in price, well, it might well do that, but it's also not going to just disappear. So where are we? Around 20,000 US dollars today. Okay, we might get some all out bloodbath to 15 or 10 grand, but is it going to go to zero, disappear forever, go bankrupt? People just don't get it when they're buying stocks and shares. Like, unless it gets bailed out by a government, a company could disappear off the face of the planet tomorrow, completely bankrupt, zero, gone. Bitcoin won't do that when you start looking at how it's built in the background. And that I love. But I won't rabbit on too long about that. So something I'd like to come back to, you touched on it towards the start, Dusan, and a second time again just now. So what is the Bitcoin Academy in Honduras, and how did you start that, or how did you get involved in that, and what's the impact that it's having?
Hmm. So it was a real coincidence that we we ended up in Roatan. I like last year I had no idea that the island even exists. But our my friend Robert, who is mining Bitcoin with us, he told me, I've been to this place. It's amazing. It's beautiful. It's in Caribbean, and I'm buying a land there. And I was like,
Wow.
what? Like, what is that? Like,
I'm
is
just
it is
looking
it
at
in
some
Honduras? Where is
pictures.
Honduras?
Beautiful.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. And he was sending me pictures, videos from the beaches. I was like, oh my God, I need to go there. So the first idea was to, okay, let's just visit. Let's just visit the place. So this year in March, we went there with my girlfriend, with my colleague that we are
Yeah.
mining with,
Hey,
and with his
babe, come
family.
with me. You want to check this place out? Yeah.
Something like that,
Yeah.
something like that. But we did like a whole month trip. We started in Roatan, then we went to Miami on a Bitcoin conference,
Cool.
and then we ended up in Dominican Republic. So it was like a long term, like a month trip. And that's why we said like, okay, let's do the Roatan. So we were just traveling there for 10 days, back and forth, enjoying the place. But I realized there is something like it popped up on a Twitter. There is something like Prospera Summit going on. And I was like, what is that? And I checked the Prospera website, like, what is the thing? And it was claimed like, okay, this new jurisdiction, Bitcoin friendly on the island. I was like, oh, this looks scammy. I saw these kind of things before, all these Satoshi Islands in Caribbean, and only on the paper, never in real life. So I was like, nah, maybe not. But the summit was at the same days that I was in Roatan. So I was like, okay, let's just go and explore that. And I came there and I was really surprised. I was really expecting, 5 people under the tent on a green,
Mhm.
grass, just speaking about how they're going to change the world. And there was like, in Prospera, it was already, building a beautiful, beautiful co-working building called Beta Building. Then the factory was being built next to it, a residency. And I was like, oh my God, so this is not on the paper. This is already happening. And about 50, 60 people came there on the summit, from all around the world. A lot of crypto people, a lot of Bitcoiners, a lot of really OGs from 2012, 2011, people that got really soon into Bitcoin. And I was fascinated by the people that came to the summit and that what's happening there. And I realized that Prospera is this new jurisdiction being developed that has a huge level of freedom and liberty from Honduras, and that they can operate on their own terms, in
Wow.
most of the time. So they had Bitcoin as a legal tender, so you can basically pay the taxes in Bitcoin or different cryptos. You can also, you don't pay taxes, capital gain taxes on Bitcoin. And I was like, oh my God, this is fascinating. And we had the opportunity to present ideas that we could develop in Prospera, in the jurisdiction. And at the time, already for a few months, I had the idea in my mind to build a Bitcoin education center, like a really place where people can come, they can learn about Bitcoin, they can set up wallets, there will be ATM, a cafeteria, something like we had in Bratislava, which was called Parallel Polis. And maybe the Prague Parallel Polis in Czech Republic. It's really well-known Bitcoin place, and it was the first crypto-only cafeteria in the world. So it was set up in 2014. So they are really long time in that. And we set it up the Slovak version, and our academy is something similar to that. A place where people can come, have coffee, and learn about Bitcoin. So I presented the idea, and they liked it. And in the first row, there was a guy sitting, and I didn't know it was a CEO of Prospera at the time. And he told me, Dusan, I like the idea. So if you want, I can show you a building where you can start it. I was like, oh my God, it's happening. So he took me to a building that's the best views on the island. It's like on the highest point of Roatan. You have amazing 360 view of that. And he told me, this was a school before, a Montessori school, but they are moving to a new place because they were growing in numbers. So the place was going to be ready since July this year. And if you want to, we can strike a deal and you can start the academy here. I was like, oh wow, this is amazing. But I needed to do a lot of thinking because it would be a huge change of lifestyle. We needed to move there for a while. A lot of investment will need to go there. So we spoke a lot with my colleague, with my girlfriend, either to do that or not. And in the end, we decided that let's do it. Let's start a new chapter and let's start the Bitcoin Academy in Prospera because, one of the reasons I decided to do that is that I want to focus on education. I don't want to focus on fighting the government because they hate Bitcoin. And in Prospera, they are the opposite. They love what we do. They are incorporating Bitcoin to their processes so we can help them a lot.
Wow.
And we have a bunch of support from them. And the other reason was that Eric, as the CEO of Prospera, they were objectivists. They were Ayn Randist, people that they read Atlas Shrugged and all the books Fountainhead from Ayn Rand, and we were speaking, an hour about libertarianism, objectivism, Ayn Rand, and all these ideas.
Wow.
And I told them that I founded a company, John Galt LLC in Slovakia. So we're having a lot of great time speaking about the ideas. So I realized, we had similar values with people, and maybe university in Guatemala, Francisco Marroquin University. Have you heard about that?
No.
It's like the most libertarian university in the world. And the founder,
I interviewed a guy called Rishi, who's part of Bitcoin Lake, and which is Lake Atitlan in Guatemala, and he went to a university there, which is probably the one you're discussing, which will be the kind of libertarian university there. Yes,
that's probably it. And the grandson of the founder of the university is one of the founders of Prospera, Gabriel Delgado.
Okay.
Amazing guy from Guatemala. And his grandfather, he knew personally Hayek, so they were friends together. So I was like, oh my God, these people, they're amazing, their ideas, their visions. So I wanted to be part of that because I think that something interesting and incredible is happening there. And I just want to help with my part with Bitcoin education, with what I love, and just to be part of the place.
Fantastic. We'll go for it. It's a very cool sounding project, I must say. And it's so interesting, isn't it, that this concept of jurisdictional arbitrage and the country that you're born in isn't the country that you have to live in. And this is connected to my comments earlier about having digital wealth. You can travel anywhere in the world with a set of, if you need to, seed phrase in your head. I mean, who's going to know what your little USB device, you're wearing a Trezor t-shirt, I see. Like, no one in customs walking into a country is going to look at your Trezor and be like, arrest him because he might be a multi-billionaire Bitcoiner. You wouldn't do that. And it's interesting because the only way that these governments that have in so many ways clearly become extremely powerful, bloated, irresponsible, unaccountable is people leave, stop paying into the system. I'm out. And when there are actually genuinely viable alternatives, like what the picture you're painting is pretty cool. Honduras is not a country that necessarily would strike me as somewhere that you'd be looking to move to on the global picture. But what are the details? Well, the details are, beautiful Caribbean island, don't have to pay tax, set up in a kind of liberal way, and it's actually separate to the mainland Honduras itself in terms of a jurisdiction. Okay, this makes more sense. And that whole concept of like talent pools, talent funnels, like countries that are very good at education, they don't necessarily keep that talent afterwards and become entrepreneurs because they go to different parts of the world. It's the same concept, but like the money you use, now that Bitcoin exists, you can be your own bank, as you mentioned, and therefore all of these different locations are now becoming completely viable spots to set up and create online businesses. Wow. Okay, well, look, very best of luck as you build that out. We're drawing to a close, Dusan. Already I've taken up almost an hour. So what I'd love to know is just a kind of final set of questions, I guess, is where do you think this is all going? So the Bitcoin mining you've got going on in Paraguay, your project in Honduras. Like, what makes you excited about the next 5 years?
I mean, I'm really excited about setting up the academy and teaching people. And really, what we want to build with METH Academy is to teach educators or to educate educators so that we can bring more Bitcoin education to the local communities without, us being present there and doing it on this centralized basis, but decentralize it in a way that we want to provide tools, know-how, skill set for Bitcoiners who are passionate about education in their local communities. So in 5 years, I want to see more academies. I think the next one will be in Paraguay. Probably maybe one in Slovakia one day. I don't know. But this is what makes me really excited. Speaking with people, the local Roatan people, they are excited about Bitcoin in general. They want to learn, and having more and more people being onboarded. I set up a huge, the mission and vision of educating 100 million people about Bitcoin by 2030, and that's a huge number that uh, every time I speak about it, I'm saying that I'm a big fan of exponential function. So I believe the highest numbers will come last year and last 2 years. So
Mm.
right now we are building basically the infrastructure, the academy, the know-how, knowledge base, the networking, the financial arm of that they can finance the education things. And this is what I'm excited about, to really aim to this vision and to create as many Bitcoiners as possible, because I think that will create more cooperation in the world, more understanding, more like lower level of oppression, and more sovereign individuals.
Yeah, wonderful. It's a great vision. I love that idea of teaching teachers. So you're enabling. Well, so there's that story, isn't there? It's like if you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day.
Mm-hmm.
If you teach a man to fish, you feed his family forever. And it's the same
Yeah.
kind of concept, isn't it? It's like, okay, if we can teach you to teach other people, and you can teach those other people to teach other people, then
Mm-hmm.
boom, off we go. So and actually, let's highlight that slightly. So 100 million people by 2030 will be as a
Yeah.
result of your teachings. How does that exponential function work? So when you run the numbers on it, so if you do, I don't know, 100 teachers this year, how does it work up to 2030 to become
Yeah,
100
I
million?
don't have the numbers now. I don't have
Okay.
the numbers. I never did the like concrete calculations of this, but I will. I will
No,
let
you
you know.
should, because it
But
probably wouldn't be impossible to actually show. I mean, of
mhm.
course, it's going to be very difficult to follow who you taught and who they taught, and to actually prove that it was a result of your program. But I love the lofty goal is always a good one. Well, Dusan, thank you so
But
much for your
basically,
time today.
it's like 100 million is like eight zeros, right? So 10 to the power of the eight, and we have basically 8 years to go.
Mm,
So if we do 100 and all of the 100 will do 100, will
yeah.
teach 100, so we get to 100 million in the end. But so that might be one way of looking at
Wow,
that.
awesome. And God knows where the price will be by that stage. And,
Yeah.
wow, there's so much to be built as well. And well, Dushan, final question is where can people reach you if they want to get in touch and learn a bit more?
Yeah, I'm responsible, not responsible. I reply on Twitter, so METH at METH on Twitter. That's our company, and my profile is Dusan underscore Matuska on Twitter, so people can reach out to me there, and we can get into communication. So any help, any tips for the academy for education is super super. I'm super excited about receiving those.
Brilliant. Well, Dushan, thank you so much for your time today and really appreciate you joining me.
Thank you, Jake. Bye.
My pleasure.